Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights in this open press discussion about the critical importance of police
Recording in progress.
My name is Maya Wiley. Sorry, just waiting to be up on camera. Okay, my name is Maya Wiley. I'm the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the nation's oldest and largest civil rights coalition with over 240 national organizational members. As we say and remind people often, we look like America. Our members are active all over this country and on every issue of relevance to civil and human rights. I say that because now, at a time when we are facing an administration that has been actively dismantling the very civil rights enforcement powers that this 75-year-old coalition has been fighting for decades, has made progress in, and the critical nature of that civil rights enforcement mechanisms, in particular, coming out of the Department of Justice, which is a creation of the Civil Rights Division, a creation of the work that this civil rights movement has been doing and engaging in for decades. The infrastructure, the work, the public servants we have talked about when we talk about the lawyers that make up the Civil Rights Division, and the consent decrees we are going to discuss today that this administration has actively not only pulled back on, making our communities more vulnerable to violence. It is also used explicitly in executive orders, the language of, quote, unleashing policing, and unleashing policing at a time when we've made progress with agreement with police departments to say there must be better training, there must be greater oversight, there must be more data collection, there must be more efforts to ensure that there are police and community relationships, and that public safety includes being safe from police violence and crime. And we have to be plain, because the consent decrees you will hear about today from the incredibly important attorneys general who have been actively engaged in this, as well as our civil rights leaders, who I will introduce in a moment, has been fundamental in ensuring that we have the goals of true public safety. One of the other things that this administration has done, which needs to be called out, is the elimination of grants to community organizations and others intended to prevent crime before it happens and ensure that police engage in their appropriate function, and so that there is greater safety, so that there are better and more important outcomes for all people. And that whether we are in Black communities, which have been disproportionately policed and harmed, as well as needing and wanting all the prevention and services, to Latino communities, to Native American communities, but also to white communities. Because as we've seen increased police misconduct also connected to exercising our First Amendment rights to protest peacefully. Part of the consent decrees from the Department of Justice, particularly in the past administration, have worked actively to ensure that all our rights are protected in policing, including that of protest. So part of the message here is to police is the wrong message. But we're very grateful that we have attorneys general. We will be joined by Attorney General Keith Ellison, by Attorney General Letitia James, Attorney General Aaron Ford, and Attorney General Kwame Raoul, all of whom will speak to their efforts to continue police accountability, despite what this administration has done. And then I'm very proud to be joined by our member organizations and leaders, Janai Nelson from the Legal Defense Fund, Derrick Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP, Juan Proaño, who leads LULAC, the nation's oldest and largest Latino organization, Yasmin Cater from the American Civil Liberties Union, Damon Hewitt, who leads the leadership, I always want to make you a leadership too, Damon, because you are, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law, And then we will go into a Q&A. So please use the Q&A function to populate questions, and please hold your questions to the end. As I said, this is open press. We are grateful you are here for this conversation, and we will make sure you have ability to follow up and get any questions asked separately that we did not have time for today. And with that, it is my great pleasure and honor to turn it over to Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Hey, everybody. Keith Ellison here, Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. And let me just tell you this. It is wrong, it's immoral, and it's bad in every conceivable way that the Department of Justice has filed a motion to dismiss the consent decree, which the Department of Justice agreed to with the city of Minneapolis. It's a bad thing, and it sends absolutely the wrong message. But I want you to know that the state of Minnesota, through the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, represented by the Attorney General's office, had a consent decree or a state version of it with the city of Minneapolis. So we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway. And for that matter, those of you wondering what's going to happen to Derrick Chauvin, he's staying in jail anyway. But my point is, it's still a very ugly sign. Let me just remind you of a few things. One is that when Trump was in office the first time, and I'll leave this to the great Kwame Raoul to discuss, but when he was in the first time, he kicked, Jeff Sessions kicked all of the consent decrees that were in existence because of the great work of Eric Holder. Just for historical reference, and that had a direct impact on some important things going on in Kwame's state, and I'm not going to touch him because he's going to do an ample job on that. My point is, this is not new, but it does mean that as state, we've got to have state pattern and practice cases, because we can't trust these people, because once they get in office, even if we get a good president, a good AG, it can change. Let me also remind you all that it was after Rodney King's brutal beating, 57 beats on the body and the head, merciless. They would coax him to move. When he did, they beat him. And 57 hits caught on video. You all saw it, and you all remember the catastrophic change and disruption and fear that it exemplified. Well, that's why the pattern and practice activity from DOJ is legal, because it was part of the 1994 Civil Rights Act, if you recall. That act had some things in it I don't love, but I do love this, and pattern and practice has helped numerous cities around the country. Look, it's when we all have a responsibility for public safety. We have a responsibility to help provide it and ensure it. When our communities are afraid of the people who are sworn to protect and serve them, they don't cooperate as much. So not only is this dismissal bad for improving democracy and rule of law and respect for law, particularly the Fourth Amendment's requirement, again, to ensure reasonable conduct from law enforcement. Not only is that an awful thing, not only is this an insult to the family of George Floyd, and everybody who protested, it is an insult to the members of law enforcement who came forward to testify in good faith and try to tell what changes need to be made. Because everybody on this call knows that there are good cops who want to do the right thing. They have to work with people like Derrick Chauvin. These pattern and practice cases help empower the people who want to do real public safety, and disempowers people who it disempowers the people who want to do the wrong thing. But now that this has been dismissed, it puts the bad guys back in charge again. And Minneapolis Police Department has both. I'll just say that, look, this DOJ consent decree is a result of an exhaustive investigative 2-year process where they found numerous examples of unconstitutional conduct by the Minneapolis Police Department, including excessive force, discrimination against Black and Native people, and violation of free speech rights. Maya, thank you so much for reminding us all that fighting against excessive force and bad police conduct and illegal, unconstitutional police conduct is not just a Black or brown issue. Do you know statistically more white people get killed by the police than anybody else? And so now look, our communities get killed disproportionately, but it's not as if white people don't have a problem with excessive force with policing. This is a national constitutional issue. In fact, it's an international issue. Since I've been Attorney General and since the Floyd case, I've spoken in Bradford, England, London, England, Malaga, Spain, Lisbon, Portugal on this very issue. Why? Because the people all over the world, friends, are very concerned about how to stop people with official status, agents of the state, from abusing the rights of civilians. So we look at this as Americans through a highly racialized lens. But this problem is a problem in Nigeria and a problem in Iran and a problem in China. This is a worldwide problem when people with the badge abuse the rights of people who don't have them for whatever reason. Maybe they're racial minorities. Maybe they're saying something the government doesn't like. But we've got to, here in America, do all we can to protect people's rights. So I'm going to stop talking right here, but I want you to know that we should protest this. We should speak against this, even though Trump's not going to hurt Minnesota because we have our own. It still is a sign of contempt, and it is a sign of disrespect, and it is a clear sign that Trump doesn't give a damn. And by the way, he pardoned about 1,200 thugs who tried to overturn the government, who injured 140 police officers. One of them lost an eye, several of them lost their lives. So Trump doesn't give a damn about police as individuals. This is not something to support police. This is something to support his ability to incite violence and to use that to justify state repression by his administration. With that, I'll stop and thank everybody for being here. What an honor it is to be in your company today. The main thing about this call is we're all in unity and in coalition together, and we need to be.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Ellison, for all those important points. And I want to bring in my own Attorney General, Tish James, who knows a thing or two about how federal government can be weaponized against the independent oversight of state attorneys general, but also who's been very active in police oversight as well. Attorney General James, over to you.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Maya and Derrick Johnson, and of course, all of my colleagues, and of course, Keith Ellison, for all that you have done. I want to thank you for your, obviously, your passion, and all of my colleagues here today. Thank you for inviting me. The Department of Justice has abandoned police reform, plain and simple. They've abandoned oversight and accountability, but I will not allow public safety to become a matter of political gamesmanship. I remain steadfast in my commitment to improving policing to ensure better and safer outcomes for law enforcement officers and the individuals they have taken an oath to serve and protect. Here in the great state of New York, one of the investigations that they've decided to abandon is in the city of Mount Vernon. And we are continuing to monitor that situation and determine what actions, if anything, we can take. So we're assessing that situation. It's really critically important that individuals understand that as attorneys general, all of us took an oath, and I took an oath to defend New Yorkers and their rights and freedoms. And while the President's Department of Justice seems intent on abdicating its responsibility and duties to Americans, I can assure you that all of us, all of my fellow Democratic attorneys general, and I will not. We face a lack of trust. There is a lack of trust between law enforcement and the general public. And we know that is born from a historic lack of accountability and transparency in policing. And my office has made major strides towards restoring that trust. We conducted a civil investigation into NYPD's response to the protest following the death of George Floyd in 2020. We held public hearings where we heard testimony and asked questions of more than 100 witnesses. We took what we learned and we filed a lawsuit on behalf of New Yorkers under the federal civil rights laws, including claims for unlawful uses of force, arrest, and First Amendment retaliation. My office, the New York Civil Liberties Union, and the Legal Aid Society, we resolved our lawsuit in a landmark settlement in 2023 that transformed the way that NYPD responds to protest. We required the NYPD to facilitate First Amendment activity. We established a tiered protest response system. We fundamentally changed crowd management and stopped the harmful tactic known as kettling, where they basically rounded up individuals in cages. We implemented stronger training and policies limiting uses of force, pepper spray, and batons. And we improved treatment of members of the press and legal observers. And since my administration has taken office, we have created special units to increase accountability and transparency. We established the Office of Special Investigation, which investigates all deaths caused by police officers or peace officers, such as correction officers. The Office of Special Investigation prosecutes officers for criminal conduct and releases detailed reports explaining every encounter where criminal prosecution is not warranted. Our Law Enforcement Misconduct Investigative Office, or LEMIO, investigates patterns of misconduct in New York's more than 500 law enforcement agencies, and that includes correctional facilities. LEMIO investigates complaints concerning allegations of excessive use of force and other misconduct. And LEMIO also determines appropriate disciplinary action and makes recommendations. In addition to that, as all of you know, as a former city council member, I push for body-worn cameras for all law enforcement officers, but particularly those in NYPD. And that effort has expanded now all throughout the state of New York. It's important to know that all of these special offices that we've created and with body-worn cameras, which provide more transparency, are a meaningful step forward, but they are not a silver bullet. And as we all know too well, there is no silver bullet, but there is all of us standing shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, fearless and determined to keep our communities safe. It will take advocacy groups and community leaders, sheriffs, chiefs, and wardens, internal affairs and disciplinary units, and civilian review boards, and legislators and district attorneys. All of us have a role to play in keeping our communities safe. And hopefully one day the federal government will join us once again. The work is hard, but it is necessary. And if this president's Department of Justice and his Attorney General will not step up for our safety and freedoms, then it's up to the states. And I'm confident that we're up to the task at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. And the civil rights community is not giving up on the federal government. We're going to fight, but we're also going to work with you, state attorneys general. And thank you for your leadership, Attorney General James. And it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Attorney General Ford, who led, even in 2020, aggressive measures in the state legislature to propose police accountability and transparency. Thank you for being here, Attorney General Ford.
Thank you so much, Maya, for your leadership, for coordinating this. And it's great to see my colleagues on the screen who are also so dedicated to justice. And I greatly appreciate them participating. And thank you to all of you others who are joining us today. At the Office of Attorney General in Nevada, we have a motto. And anyone who's known me and heard me speak knows what I'm about to say. Our job is justice. And we operate under what we call our 5 C's. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will just hit on the fact that this conversation touches on 2 of those C's: constitutional and civil rights, and criminal justice and reform. You see, right now we find ourselves at a pivotal moment, one in which the Department of Justice, rather than standing as our shield, is tearing at the very fabric of our civil rights protections and weaponizing the force of government against communities it should serve. We've heard promises of consent decrees, yet too often those promises ring hollow, especially now that the DOJ is dismissing consent decrees and investigations. Meanwhile, too many families are still living in fear, and too many neighborhoods are bearing the scars of injustice. That's why I'm calling on every state attorney general, not just those who are on the screen with us right now, and every advocate in this virtual room to seize this moment. This convening is a great start, Maya, and thank you again for doing that, but it will take more, including coordination with civil rights communities, grassroots organizers, faith leaders, legal scholars, and elected officials. Together, we can chart a course forward and, for example, share best practices for bringing actions and responding when lines are crossed. We can also continue strategizing on model legislation to require independent investigations and civil oversight boards. My good colleague, my frat brother, Kwame Raoul, led the conversation early on about giving states pattern and practice investigatory authority. And because of his conversation, I went to my legislature, as you indicated, Maya, in 2020, and I asked for that. So in Nevada, we now have pattern and practice authority in my office where we can initiate investigations into departments that are alleged to be engaging in discriminatory behaviors. This supplements my earlier successful efforts at requiring body cameras on law enforcement. That's something that I did when I was in the state legislature. To Tisha's point, these are very important components of a successful community law enforcement relationship. And finally, I'll note that we can continue coordinating in things such as demand letters and leverage every tool at our disposal, whether they be subpoenas, injunctions, public reports, to hold bad actors accountable. Here in Las Vegas, we're fortunate to have law enforcement agencies that are dedicated to the communities, and we don't have any consent decrees that are being rolled back. Our relationships are improving on a day-to-day basis, and I'm so proud of the work that they do. But we have to continue building this network of solidarity, because when one jurisdiction falls silent, another jurisdiction must raise its voice. When one victim is denied justice, we actually all bear the cost. So let's keep working, and let's make clear that police accountability is not a partisan talking point. It's an imperative. And so together, we have to continue to defend our rights, to secure our communities, and to ensure that the promise of justice continues to ring true for every resident in every state. And again, thank you so much, Maya. Thank you to my colleagues and to others on the screen here for participating in this conversation. Count me in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess Divine Nine is in every important room. So Attorney General Raoul, you have also been a critical leader in police reform. And I want to also thank you for one of the examples that every leader here has touched on, which is your example on entering into your own consent decrees. But I turn it over to you now to share your wisdom as well.
Well, thank you all, and thank you both, Keith, and to my frat brother, AG Ford, for the shout out. And of course, to my colleague, Tish James, who's led us on so many fronts that we've been active on, not only over the last 4 months, but over a number of years. As Keith alluded to, this is not our first rodeo with this. During President Trump's first tenure as president, then Attorney General Sessions took a step back off of the work that Loretta Lynch did here in the city of Chicago, investigating the Chicago Police Department for a history of unconstitutional policing. Fortunately, the Department of Justice under AG Lynch's leadership were able to complete their investigation and issue a report on the long history of excessive force and other constitutional violations by the Chicago Police Department. However, when Jeff Sessions backed away, my predecessor stepped forth with the lawsuit, and there were a number of other parties to that lawsuit, civil rights organizations here within the state of Illinois. 2 months into my administration, we began the implementation of a consent decree. And I can tell you today, because states stepped up, because civil rights organizations stepped up when the Department of Justice under Trump stepped away. We've had successful implementation of a consent decree here in the city of Chicago that has led to great successes. And I will mention two such things that is evidence of that. One is the Democratic National Convention, which was held here last year. Were it not for the collaboration, were it not for the consent decree, were it not for the engagement of civil rights organizations as well as the Attorney General's office in making sure that folks had a right to express their First Amendment rights, yet we were able to maintain order, that everybody enjoyed the convention we hosted last year. That came about as a result of years of work. Initially, there was resistance from the Chicago Police Department leadership. Now we have a superintendent that fully invests in the notion of constitutional policing, realizes the value of a consent decree implementation to officer wellness, to officer training, to community police relationships. And as a result, 2 weeks ago, I attended a Chicago Police Department recognition ceremony that I had attended in the past, where awards were historically given out to people who may have been shot in the line of duty or have had to use force to apprehend offenders. There were a number of awards given out because of officers' de-escalation, successful de-escalation. Now, that is a product of pursuing constitutional policing. Patterns and practice investigative authority was mentioned, and we were able to get that authority from our legislature, and we've exercised it in the city of Joliet. And we just completed an investigation several months ago, and we're at a stage of negotiating with the city and the police department. I mention all this evidence as reason to be hopeful and confident that, notwithstanding the fact that the Department of Justice is stepping away, the states collaborating with community and civil rights organizations can step up into the gap, and we will. Thank you for convening this.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing that important leadership from the state level, from attorneys general's offices. We're looking forward to partnering more, but I do want to go now to Janai Nelson, who is the Director Counsel and Head of the Legal Defense Fund. Janai, break down the consent decrees for us.
Well, thank you so much, Maya. I am pleased to be here and so glad that you gathered us. And also want to thank the state attorneys general for their support and leadership in this moment. I am proud to lead the Legal Defense Fund, an organization that's been fighting against police violence and law enforcement misconduct since our founding 85 years ago in 1940. And sadly, too little progress has been made, and we have now taken a very significant step backwards with this administration. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice has existed as one of the most important arms of the Department of Justice for almost 70 years, but it took Trump only 4 months to turn it on its head. And this decision to abandon federal consent decrees that had been reached in Minneapolis and Louisville almost 5 years to the day that the world watched in horror as George Floyd took his last breaths while crying out for mercy is a disgraceful act that once again makes plain the true nature of this administration, which is hypocritical, irresponsible, and lawless. The agreements that were reached in Minneapolis and Louisville specifically, after rigorous investigations, found that their police departments engaged in widespread misconduct and abuses of power, the kind of unlawful conduct that has always disproportionately harmed Black people and Black communities. And in a perverse sleight of hand, this administration is trying to advance a false narrative that consent decrees themselves threaten public safety. And, you know, frankly, that is almost laughable if this were just no laughing matter. In Minneapolis alone, Black people were found to have been stopped by police at a rate of 6.5 times higher than the stops of white people. Native Americans were found to have been stopped at a rate at nearly 8 times greater. The Department of Justice's investigation also found that stops involving Black and Native Americans were far more likely to involve the use of force. So as George Floyd's death painfully reminds us, stops involving excessive force can be a matter of life and death for Black and brown people. Contrary to this administration's inaccurate claim that consent decrees unnecessarily handcuff law enforcement, the reality is they actually minimize harm both for communities and for law enforcement, and especially in very vulnerable communities. They help law enforcement officers do a better job of protecting and serving all community members within the bounds of the law. So this is not just a matter for Black and brown communities, it is a matter for law enforcement. And they should be seeking more protection from the Department of Justice through consent decrees that are mutually agreed upon by those jurisdictions and the communities that they serve. When we dismiss these truths, we are effectively allowing police officers and history has shown how vitally important it is for the Department of Justice to enter into court-approved agreements with state and local law enforcement agencies. The goal is to ensure that police reforms progress in the independent and impartial hands of a federal court and court monitor, not at the direction of political figures who are preoccupied with winning elections or may lose interest when a reform isn't politically useful, or worse, as we're seeing in this moment, want to weaponize the safety of American communities in a way that police reform sends us back to the days before Rodney King's vicious police beating in Los Angeles, when it set that city on fire. Is one of the most longstanding and dehumanizing examples of American racism. The law demands better from law enforcement. The people demand better from law enforcement, and so should our government, so should this administration, and we will not relent in demanding that of this administration. Just 5 years ago, millions of people took to the street to protest horrific police killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, countless other Black people, and the fight for justice and dignity for Black people goes beyond the last 5 years. It is one that has spanned centuries. So those of us on this call, our allies, every single person who cares about our multiracial democracy must fight against this deplorable dereliction of duty by the Department of Justice. DOJ may have relinquished its standing as an arbiter of civil rights enforcement. It may have tarnished its reputation and its legacy, but we will not be deterred. We will continue the important fight for real safety and security for all of us. And there's more that can be done with the power of the people on this call and the communities that we represent. We urge presiding judges to hold the Department of Justice accountable and all relevant law enforcement agencies accountable. And we call on state attorneys general, the ones on this call who have already made the commitment, but others, no matter their party, no matter their background, to fill the void left by DOJ's refusal to protect the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Janai. And I thank you for the reminder. The estimates were between 15 to 26 million people protested after George Floyd's murder, the largest in the history of the country that's been recorded, and that was almost 8,000 separate protests. So Derrick, as both a brilliant leader, thinker in your own right at the NAACP, and one who's been actively engaged in not just policing issues, but in the mobilization necessary to make change, as the NAACP always has been, share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Maya, for pulling this group together so quickly. Thank you, Janai, for really giving us a charge into all the state attorney generals. What we are witnessing here isn't a surprise. I think it was A.G. Ellison said they did the same thing under Trump 1. But when you add this on top of their march towards redefining the role of government in a way in which will be unrecognizable if their current budget proposal was adopted, we are creating a cultural reality of this country that will look more like the 1950s than it should, where rogue officers, in many cases, who should not be sworn officers. We on this Zoom, we support law enforcement. We think law enforcement is necessary. The vast majority of those who are sworn to protect and serve are doing so with honor. But we have individuals among their ranks that should be held accountable. And the removal of the consent orders in targeted districts that have a track record is something that we should all be concerned about. In fact, we have some law enforcement agencies that operate more like militias than they do agencies that are sworn to uphold the Constitution. So in this environment, on top of the rhetoric that's coming from the White House, in addition to all of the attacks on everything that's based on diversity or inclusion, we will see, unfortunately, an increase of police incidents. As a community, as citizens, we should resist at all costs. I commend all of the 8 state AGs for using the tools within your toolbox to push back against the current culture and climate that's being set by this administration, because I fear what we witnessed during the first term of Trump, we're about to see the same. If you think about that 1 week of terror, you had a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, targeting the Latino community. Within a few days, you had an attempted mass shooting at a Black church in Louisville, Kentucky, which resulted in a mass shooting at a Kroger targeting African Americans. And the very next day, a mass shooting in Pittsburgh targeting the Jewish community. It opens up a culture, an environment of hate, where you have individuals taking what they think justice in their own hands, and you have rogue law enforcement officers who are able to commit harm to people, to citizens, to communities without any accountability. So unfortunately, we are back into that era of all of us banding together is really important. We must fight as much as we can, identify solutions jointly, and recognize DOJ under this administration will not be the DOJ that it should be, to ensure that equal protection under the law is afforded to all citizens, and that we could rest assured that those bad officers who are sworn to uphold the constitutions will violate the constitutions, and there will be no accountability from this administration. But we are thankful for the AGs who are willing to step up, as we must continue to fight against the radical redefining of government, whether it's through our budget, the taking of Social Security, the taking of veterans benefits, the taking of Medicaid benefits, where many of our senior citizens will be kicked out, and now the removal of the accountability standards set by the DOJ to ensure those who are sworn to uphold the law actually do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick, and for your leadership. And for all of you, and everyone has made reference to the fact that this is affecting everyone. That includes Latinos. We are very honored to be joined by Juan Proaño, who leads LULAC, which is the nation's oldest Latino civil rights organization with members in every state and outside of the United States. And Juan, we obviously have seen both police violence in Latino communities, racial profiling by police in Latino communities, but we've also seen mass deportation and the efforts to get local police engaged in ICE activities. So share with us the Latino perspective on this and anything else that's relevant from the Latino community.
Thank you very much, Maya, and thank you, Derrick, for that very powerful message. So as Maya said, my name is Juan Proaño, and I'm the CEO of the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, the country's oldest Latino civil rights organization. For nearly a century, 96 years, LULAC has really stood at the forefront of fighting for Latino civil rights. And today we issue a grave warning. This country is at risk of abandoning the very communities that it claims to protect. And today I have to speak out on these issues that strikes at the heart of justice and fairness in our country. This week, the U.S. Department of Justice signaled the scaling back of these consent decrees, the very tools designed to enforce constitutional policing in cities where serious abuses have already been proven, not merely alleged. Let's be clear, consent decrees are not symbolic. They're legally binding mechanisms established after federal investigations confirm unconstitutional patterns of policing. These are not theoretical wrongs. These are documented violations, often years in the making, uncovered through thorough and painstaking reviews. In Phoenix, for instance, where Latinos make up 42% of the population, the DOJ documented excessive use of force and discriminatory treatment, especially toward Latino youth and individuals with limited English proficiency. Similar misconduct has been identified in Trenton, Memphis, and Louisiana, areas with large Latino and Black populations. These findings include racial profiling, failure to provide language access, and systemic abuse that has gone unchecked for years. And now the oversight meant to correct these abuses is being rolled back. Across the country, more and more local police departments are being tasked with enforcing federal immigration policy, a deeply troubling trend that blurs the line between community protection and immigration enforcement. This creeping deputization of local officers pulls them into the orbit of federal agencies like ICE and U.S. Border Patrol, agencies already under fire for their own longstanding records of abuse, misconduct, and impunity. Meanwhile, the data points to a very different and grim picture. According to Axios, the rate of Latinos killed by law enforcement jumped nearly 45% over the past decade. That's not just a statistic, it's a warning sign. And yet, despite these disturbing rise, Latinos remain vastly underrepresented in conversations about police violence, even years after the murder of George Floyd sparked global protests and calls for racial justice. What happens when these consent decrees are removed? The answer is very simple, and it's dangerous. Local departments are left to police themselves, and the model that has failed time and time again. These decrees are often the only enforceable mechanism for ensuring real reform. Policies that prevent racial profiling, protect people with limited English skills, and limited use of deadly force. For us, these civil rights, they're not temporary. And justice is not to protect you when it is abandoned halfway. So for those reasons, we stand with the leadership conference, with the attorney generals present and not present, and also with our partners and allies in the civil rights community. We demand justice, we demand oversight above all, and really we demand accountability.
Thank you, Juan. And I want to turn it over to Yasmin Cater, just to give her full title, which I did not do earlier. Yasmin is not only the Deputy Legal Director at the American Civil Liberties Union, but also the Director of the Trone Center for Justice and Equality, a longtime advocate in her own right, and the ACLU as an incredible partner on police accountability and reform. Tell us what you're seeing, tell us about the impacts, tell us what we should do.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you to everyone who has presented today. I'm just really honored to be here and to be a part of this movement. So what everyone has noted and what is so abundantly clear is that the Department of Justice is abandoning what is truly a core function. And that is the function of federal oversight, that important muscle over state and local police departments. And historically, this has been such an important integral role in exposing unconstitutional and racially biased policing, and played an important role in working with communities to seek reform. But now we are seeing not just an abandonment and a backtrack, but also truly a contempt and disrespect to communities. This is a clear indication that not only will the federal government fail to protect people from continued misconduct and abuse, but in fact, their rhetoric is encouraging such. So in the face of this, we as a movement are even more committed to creating the change we want to see in our communities. And we at the ACLU are stepping into the void that has been left by the Department of Justice's abandonment. Yesterday, we launched our 7 States Safety Campaign, where we are targeting 7 places where the Department of Justice itself found a combination of improper use of force and racial targeting. And we put phase 1 of this campaign in motion yesterday, and we sent targeted demands to departments to provide us, and demanding that they provide us with a record of their use of force, with records of racial targeting, and with records of recent policy changes that they have made since the Department of Justice's investigative findings were revealed. What we are banking on is that this is going to give us a snapshot of what the problems are that are happening now. And that is information that we're going to combine with what we already know from our partners on the ground, communities who have been the core of leading this change. And when we have this information, we will come together as a movement to use our tools of litigation and advocacy. We're focused on Louisville, Memphis, Minneapolis, Mount Vernon, Phoenix, Rankin County, Mississippi, and Worcester. So let's talk just a little bit about what we already know from the reports that the Department of Justice did itself. What they revealed were continued patterns of extreme violence and harm. In Memphis, they were punching and kicking people who are already in handcuffs. In Louisville, the police were releasing canine units, vicious dogs on people who were already following police orders, including a 14-year-old child. And in Minneapolis, as Attorney General Ellison talked about, police routinely still using, to this day, neck restraints, one that was so severe it caused a man to lose consciousness. In Lexington, Mississippi, they tasered a man until he vomited and couldn't walk. In Phoenix, the police were shooting tasers and firearms at people who are already incapacitated, and then claiming that this use of force was a form of de-escalation. And then in Mount Vernon and Worcester, police strip searching people and sexually assaulting women under the threat of arrest. Importantly, and I really need to emphasize, these are not isolated incidents. These are just some extreme examples, but that are reflecting of patterns of violence and discrimination that have infected entire departments and reflect, frankly, avoidable department-wide failures in practice, in policies, and in supervision. But what we've seen today from the esteemed attorney generals on this call who have made it abundantly clear, we do not have to wait for the federal government, and we're not. Listen, what these elected officials here have showed us is that they have the power and the responsibility to address the deep problems the Department of Justice has uncovered. So it is now the time for us to link arms in our states, follow their lead, and make sure and hold everyone accountable for following through on those words with actions. We're all here to work together, but I want to be heard, particularly to those who are not on this call, the attorney generals who have not joined us today. We are here to hold them accountable too.
Thank you, Yasmin, for that incredible work. I will say for everyone on, we did have other attorney generals who were wanted to be with us, but could not make the time work. We have incredibly busy and important attorney generals, leaders who are actively involved and engaged with us, and to Yasmin's point, there are some others we're going to work on. But please do not take it as an indicator that there aren't many other attorneys general who are allies in this fight and leading the work from their states, and we're very grateful for them. And you will see us all working together with them, as well as the attorney generals who are on this Zoom, who've been leading the way. Last and never least ever is Damon Hewitt, who leads the Lawyers Committee on Civil for Civil Rights Under Law, itself a legacy civil rights organization. Damon, you've been doing incredible work. The Lawyers Committee has on litigating. I want to help you take us home, but there's also a question in the Q&A I think you may also want to address in your remarks if you choose, but that these announcements on retracting findings of civil rights violations in multiple police departments, naming Memphis, does this have any legal bearing for lawsuits that have been filed and amended since the report was initially released? So just throwing that in case you want to also address that, but please.
Thanks so much, my leadership conference friends and our attorneys generals. These are America's attorneys general in so many ways, literally and figuratively right now. You know, at the Lawyers Committee, a key part of our work is to do our part to help keep Black communities safe from all forms of violence. It's really a safety analysis. It's safety from state violence by police and safety from white supremacist violence by civilian vigilantes. Both sting our communities more robustly than any other community in this country. But we also know that the experience of Black communities is a lens through which to view what can happen and what has happened, as my colleagues have said, to so many others. How can we trust the Department of Justice that makes such decisions to keep us safe from all forms of violence? How can we trust this Department of Justice to keep us safe when it's fomenting hate day by day? This is a serious problem. This decision is a repudiation of the value of Black life, the sanctity of our lives, and also common sense community safety principles. It's a repudiation of law because DOJ has responsibility, and as one of the attendees has said in the question, there are findings of fact about this is exactly what's been happening in various communities. Those findings, those truths do not go away, and they can and must be leveraged by our attorneys general, by our civil society organizations like the ACLU's project that they mentioned, and many others of us in advocacy in communities, first and foremost, but also, frankly, civil litigation, because these truths don't go away. What's happening here is a repudiation, frankly, of the American people and our own common sense. After a multiracial coalition of people took to the streets peacefully to demand justice and accountability over the past 5 years, we actually have seen changes, especially locally. There's what DOJ has done, but there's also context for that, what DOJ did in the last administration. Most of the nation's large cities actually adopted some form of alternative public safety responses to deploy supports, not just law enforcement and punitive responses for community needs, especially mental health needs. Over 30 states have enacted new laws addressing police accountability and oversight. About 24 jurisdictions have new chokehold restrictions or bans. 21 of the nation's largest police departments adopted requirements for officers to intervene when they witness their colleagues engage in unlawful conduct. So this is not just about a few random policies and practices. This is about changing what Americans understand is the fundamentally broken culture of policing. Yes, there are many good and law-abiding police officers, but they have to exist in a culture that is fundamentally broken. You can't tell me it's not broken, because otherwise these atrocities wouldn't happen, and they wouldn't happen with such impunity all across the nation's 18,000 law enforcement agencies. So Americans embrace and demand accountability. Now, you've heard the context from my colleagues about why these consent decrees and the investigations are so important. Just a word on the consent decrees. These are not radical departures. These are simply actions consistent with the Department of Justice's extant authority that it's had for a number of years. And it just sends a message that our pain simply does not matter. To repudiate those consent decrees. To repudiate the investigation findings, as my other colleague said, would be laughable if it wasn't so sad and so serious. But here's where we all come in. we can take those findings and leverage them in community advocacy first and foremost, at the local level. We know that most law enforcement agencies are local. Most law enforcement agencies are small. They're not the size of New York or LA or even Chicago. Most of them have fewer than 100, sometimes fewer than 75 officers. We see harms in those kinds of places as well. Every local organizing effort, organization throughout the country can take these types of findings, especially the parts that are already public, and leverage them in your advocacy. We at the Lawyers Committee call upon the nation's mayors, police chiefs, and other local leaders to actually adopt those findings that are being withdrawn, adopt them as your own, and implement reforms and changes in a transparent and accountable way, heeding those findings. I also will say to local leaders, you had better think long and hard about what it could cost you to simply run in the other direction. What it can cost, not in terms of lives and livelihoods, but what it could cost you in terms of liability. Next time there's an administration that actually cares about civil rights, when one of these attorneys generals comes down on you and they can show that you acted with impunity, even though you had knowledge of these types of findings, there's going to be a harder road to hoe locally for you to actually get away with that. And we don't think that you can. We won't allow you to. At the Lawyers Committee, we'll also be taking a look at another unspoken piece, the gravy train of federal taxpayer dollars that goes toward paying for resources for local law enforcement that continues to violate our civil rights. That's almost being rewarded for violating our rights. We can't allow that to continue to happen. So we are going forward, not going to allow this nation to go backward. George Floyd should be allowed today. Breonna Taylor should be allowed today, and so many others. It is how we act now that honors their legacy and their memory that matters a lot, and we intend to act in the interest of justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just, if there are any last questions, the Q&A, please list them. I am not currently seeing any. We've had, one more came in. Thank you. Thank you all for holding this press conference. Do you believe there's any truth to the concern that the Trump administration is taking action, including through the end of consent decrees, to goad the Black community into action and then justify stringent crackdown? Keith, I'm going to send this your way because we have had this conversation in the threats about pardoning Derrick Chauvin, and then open it up to you, Tish, and to you, Aaron. Keith?
Well, let me say, I don't know any more than anyone else, but if history is any guide, we better be prepared for that possibility. And we can't stop protesting. Part of that concern is, oh, well, if he's trying to goad us into being able to justify invocation of the Insurrection Act, maybe we shouldn't protest. No, that's not the answer. The answer is, yes, people have a right to their First Amendment, but we might want to be a little bit more creative. What about singing protests? What about silent protests? What about other ways to make the point clear that doesn't necessarily walk right into his hands? I think that it is important to protest. It's also important to know that there was times in the past when he did talk about trying to federalize the National Guard. He did talk about the Insurrection Act, and there was a lot of language around that. And quite honestly, you can't put it past him. So when people were asking me, well, is he going to pardon Chauvin? I'd say, well, he just pardoned 1,200 people who beat the cops who were trying to protect the Capitol. So I don't have any information that he's going to do that, but I don't think we can put it past him. But the real question at the end of the day is, what are we going to do? What is our response and what is our action going to be? We've got to initiate, we've got to stand on our rights, we've got to resist oppression, and we've got to make justice despite this wannabe dictator. So the answer is, nobody can know exactly, but we better be prepared for it, and we better talk about it. Last point on this point. Look, in March 2024, all of us AGs on this call started working on how to respond to Trump when he came our way with all this unconstitutional stuff. When he tried to destroy birthright citizenship on January 21st, we were ready. And so we've been able to keep up with him And I think we're on our 23rd lawsuit. I'm not sure, maybe Tish has been keeping count, but my point is that he didn't catch us on our heels. So in light of this Insurrection Act sort of threat, don't we need to get together and figure out what we do if this happens?
Yes,
And the answer is, I think, yes.
the answer is yes. Attorney General James, then Attorney General Ford.
So let me just also say, I was contacted by the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General of Washington, Nick Brown, the Attorney General of Maryland, Anthony Brown, and so many others who wanted to be here this afternoon, but unfortunately, their schedules, they had conflicts in their schedule.
Correct.
So I'm not going to feed this racist trope, this stereotype that somehow we're going to be violent. I'm just not going to even entertain that thought. We have consistently and repeatedly all throughout history protested peacefully, and we will continue to do so. We need to flip that question on its head and ask, why is it that this administration is filled with individuals with racial animus? Why are they attacking DEI? Why did they disrespect the president of South Africa yesterday? Why did they set him up? Why are they terminating all of these individuals in the federal government? The vast majority of them are women of color. That's the question that we should be posing to this administration. We will continue to protest as we have historically done, standing up for our rights. But it's going to take state attorneys general to do the right thing and to enforce the federal law, to recognize that we have police powers, that some of our states have the ability to investigate pattern and practice, and that here in New York, we've got special powers to ensure that there is accountability and that we can heal that lack of trust which continues to exist between police and community and bring people together. That's what I'm focused on. But it's important that individuals march and continue to march peacefully and to stand up for their rights and for their liberties and for their freedom, which is under attack right now. Its responsibility falls on our shoulders, but it also falls on the shoulders of Americans right now who believe in our democracy and the rule of law. I'm not gonna fall for these racist tropes, not now, not ever.
We who believe in freedom do not rest. Attorney General Ford.
Listen, I can't say it any better than either of my two colleagues there. And Chandelice, let me say to you, I gave up a long time ago on trying to guess what the motivation was for Mr. Trump. Partially because I can only control what I can control. And part of that you've already heard from Tish James and from Keith Ellison. What we're doing today is great. It's reactive in some sense, because we've heard that he is getting rid of these consent decrees, but it's proactive in the sense that we're also getting the word out, that we're sharing what we're learning to the communities and hoping that people will continue to talk about that so that they can prepare for whatever action they want to take that's peaceful and that's appropriate, right? And so, look, at the end of the day, we will continue to stand up for what's right. We will defend these freedoms. We will defend, our communities, and we will uphold our oaths of office. One of the things that I've always said is, in my position as Attorney General, I don't make decisions or actions based on how it's going to affect my political future going forward. I never have. When I was in the state Senate, I didn't do that. When I was a first-term Attorney General, I didn't do that. As this time Attorney General, who's running for another office later on, it doesn't matter to me, because standing up for what's right is always right. And a lot of times people get in these positions and it becomes their identity. It defines them. That is not the case with Keith. That's not the case with Tish. It's not the case with Kwame or the other attorneys general that Tish named out for us. It's certainly not the case for me. This is what I do, not who I am. Who I am as a husband and a father and a neighbor and a Christian who needs to stand up for what's right, irrespective, and speak truth to power from this position of power. And doing that is how we can affect real change in response to, but also being proactive in a circumstance where we find ourselves, in a precarious circumstance. And, whatever his motivation was is irrelevant. Let us continue moving forward to encourage our own communities, whether again, it's through peaceful protests or whether it's through the other types of ideas that I mentioned in my opening comments. I will remain true to that particular effort. And again, commend you, Maya, for convening us. I must apologize. I'm going to have to run, but I wanted to respond to this question in particular and say thank you so much for all the leadership that's on this screen. And I look forward to continuing partnerships with everyone. Okay.
And we will be in partnership and appreciate all of your leadership. We are over time. We have one other question, but we will take it offline and answer it separately. And I will only close with this. This group of leaders and all the leaders who are part of this continuing work, who were not able to be here today and who we know to be allies in it, will not stop until everyone is safe in their communities and until everyone is safe, no matter how they appear, the color of their skin, their zip code, and will not stop, particularly in a context. And I just want to lift up what both Attorney General Ellison said and Attorney General James, where what we're really being told with these consent decrees is if people perpetrate violence and this administration likes it, it can be unleashed. And if anyone protests peacefully and this administration doesn't like it, it will be unleashed. And it is that we will not tolerate against any single person or community in this country. And I'm just grateful for all of the leadership and the continuing partnership, and we will continue to be in touch with you. Please know that we are capturing the questions and we will follow up on the answers. And please know that we will be in partnership and coalition, and we will not stop until justice is done. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.